in order to understand this, I think it would be helpful if I put it in context of this little town of Elk Rapids is where my father and Aunt Vera were born and raised, went to school there. At the turn of the century, it was a big logging community. There was a chain of lakes, Elk Lake and Torch Lake, and then some other lakes beyond that, where they would cut the timber up there and float it through this chain of lakes down to Elk Rapids, which sat on the shore of Lake Michigan. And they had piers that ran out into the lake, and sailing ships and eventually steamships would come in there, and they would load lumber on that. Later on, they built a iron ore smelting plant there in Elk Rapids because they had enough timber to make charcoal to smelt the iron. And they would bring the ore from Lake Superior, northern part of the state, down there, dump the ore off. They would make the iron ore from it, or they make the iron pigs from it, and then take it usually down to Chicago or Detroit. But at the turn of the century, Elk Rapids, as they report, it was probably 3,000 people. When I was a kid going up there, there was maybe, during the winter there was maybe 400 or 500 people. In the summer you would get a lot of tourists come in, so it would get larger, but it was really a very small town, one main street, which is, when we went up there, Richard, you remember we spent some time up there. Yeah. The Grange Hall is still there. We have some pictures, and I'll include those in the book and on the video. Grandpa and Uncle Tom were kind of jacks of all trades, but the thing that they were best known for was being the barbers in this little town, and they had a shop right on Main Street, and that in those days, well, at the turn of the century, but then later on when I was a kid coming up there, it was still the gathering place for a lot of people, and on weekends they would have hot water in the tub and people would come and take their baths down there. Had a pot-bellied stove that they heated it with in the winter. The clock that's in my office here was the one that was hanging on the wall in the barber shop. So, where we had a house was just one block from the main street. And back in the 30s and the 40s, nobody ever locked their house in the town. My parents never thought anything about it. I would sometimes get up, when the sun came up, and 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, and put my bathing suit on. I'd be gone all day long. Meet my friends, and we'd go swimming or do whatever. If you got into trouble, your folks knew about it before you got home. It was that's how small the town was. Felt safe, secure. Everything was right with the world. It was idyllic. It was the Depression era, the 30s. I never experienced what, the adult population experienced. We always had a victory garden. We always ate. We would go fishing if we wanted protein. And we'd always catch a lot of fish, so we always had something to eat. Grandma Oatley, my mother's mother, lived with us. As a matter of fact, from she was living with my parents before I was born, and she lived with them until she died. She was a baker she was a super baker, and you always had fresh bread and pies and rolls, and what more could a kid want, A full belly, a place to go swimming every day, anytime you wanted to go, friends that lived just down the street. So.
And your grandfather was the barber, so it was like.
Yeah. And, and he was, Uncle Tom, both he and Uncle Tom were the barbers.
Yeah.
And they were well known and sometimes respected. Because, well, their reputations preceded them. I didn't know about this until just recently, but I read someplace, and I think one of you were talking about it either last night or this morning, that Uncle Tom found out he could make some money by getting eagle feathers and selling them to somebody in Chicago
Yeah.
that would come up for the summer.
I thought it was entire bald eagle. I thought it was a live.
Well,
bald
maybe it
eagle.
was a live
Yeah.
bald eagle, but
Two live bald eagles.
he did. He was able to get some bald eagles and sell them, and somebody found out about it. It was illegal as hell. You couldn't, you can't shoot the national bird, or you can't capture it.
Right.
And he got fined for it. I don't think he ever spent any time in jail, but